Real quick, before we get into the show, I wanted to share a new service called Getita that Ken and I have been using that has made us over $10,000 in Amazon reimbursements. The service requires no monthly subscription, and Getita collects a small percentage of the money they recover for you. It takes less than 5 minutes to set up and works on all Amazon marketplaces. Go to Getita.com, Getida, and enter promo code FTM400. That's FTM for Firing the Man 400 to get your first $400 in reimbursements commission free. How much money does Amazon owe you?
Welcome everyone to the Firing the Man podcast, a show for anyone who wants to be their own boss. If you sit in a cubicle every day and know you are capable of more, then join us. This show will help you build a business and grow your passive income streams in just a few short hours per day. And now your hosts, serial entrepreneurs David Schomer and Ken Wilson.
How can people use ChatGPT to accelerate the creation process?
Sure. So it's just a really good wall to bounce ideas off of. Sometimes, we join masterminds or go to groups where we talk to other people and we say all this stuff and then we figure out on our own. Like we say, oh, thanks for your help. And the person's like, I didn't talk yet. So there's something about talking out loud and bouncing an idea that can be very valuable. If you're just being totally original creative, you can ChatGPT really shines in that area because it doesn't weight good and bad. So it just kind of will go very random. And sometimes random comes up with great ideas. You're just bouncing ideas. As you work through the process, every single part can be faster because sometimes we get slowed down. And like for me, writing a book is easier than writing the book description, the sale, because you have to do it and then you have to format H1s. Like how I have to think about how is this book different from my other books, right? How can I write a different description? What keywords do I need to put in there, right? And that's a process that's not fun because it's not creative. So whatever process is hard for you, you can have it do that process. I'll give you a specific example. This might be more helpful, is that I always try to do things that have a high risk of failure. So like when I do a live demo, I'll always do something that's very risky because I want to live on the edge. It's like, I want to see how far I can push ChatGPT. So I was playing with it early on and everyone's like, oh, you can't get ChatGPT to write a novel that will pass AI tests. I go, I bet I can. Challenge accepted. Like that's my first thought. So I go, I'm going to write a novel. Let me do a romance novel because I never read romance. Like I want to do something hard. It's easy for me to do science fiction because I have good error correction because I read a lot of sci-fi. So I'm doing this romance novel and I just find a process. And the process is really, hey, give me 3 ideas for a romance novel. Okay, I pick one. To succeed with fiction, you need a series. So I say, okay, write out give me a paragraph of each of the 7 books in the rest of the series. And I go, okay, change this one, change that one, change this one, change that one. So what I'm really doing is I'm choose your own adventuring it, right? I'm kind of modifying it as it goes each step. I go, okay, write me a character sheet about the main character. Oh, I don't like this, change that. I don't like this, change that. Write me a character sheet about the love interest. By doing it one by one, slowly creating, and then I create the outline and then a deep outline. And what this does is, now that I have the outline of the book and it follows a flow I find interesting, I can then error correct. So when it starts writing the book, I can go, wait, this doesn't match what the outline says. So going in this order, it lets you kind of like mind mapping. You do the inner and then the outer and the outer. So whatever, any creative process, you can have it do everything. And because you keep choosing, like my main skill as an author is not that I'm interesting. It's that I can tell when someone's being boring if I'm interviewing someone and I make them talk about something else. I have a really low threshold for boring. So when I'm interviewing someone like to ghostwrite their book, I'm like, no, you got to stop. You're killing me. Change the subject, right? Will do that because if I'm bored, the reader will be bored. So it's not like I have this great writing skill. I just have a very low attention span for boring, and it forces the content to be interesting. So in the same way, if whatever you're an expert at, when you have it driving, and this is where the ChatGPT is driving instead of you can have it create the content, and your job is to give me 3 to choose from, give me 10 to choose from. Oh, I don't like that chapter, change it. So you can then go, oh, I don't like this ending. Like there's a huge issue in romance. You have to let people know if there's not a happily ever after ending because they get really mad in the reviews. If it's a surprise bad ending, they go crazy on you. It's like going to war with your reviewers. It's so they take it really seriously. So you have to say no, happily ever after. It's such a big deal. But so you can then change the ending. What someone actually did, and the reason OpenAI is getting sued, someone had ChatGPT write the final 2 books in the Sword of Fire and Ice books. This guy, George R. R. Martin's taken too long. In his style, write books 6 and 7, and it did it. I'm so mad. And he's so mad. And it's also like, you've had 10 years. Like, come on. It's at this point, it's really you. But it's also like, It's a scary place to realize. And here's the thing. They're probably good. They're probably really great reads. It's not exactly what he would have done, but it's probably 80% of the way there, has the other books to build on. And I wish they'd used it because the last 2 seasons of the HBO show where they had no books, where, let's be honest, everyone hated those seasons. So that's exactly what happened. So now you have this ability to create later works that is very interesting. So the creative process can be you driving and error correcting, or it can be ChatGPT drives and you go, wait, that's weird, or that doesn't make sense, or that's off track, or you just introduced a character that's not in the outline. What are you doing? So you're kind of following and error correcting, kind of saying, this isn't interesting, change this. What you can't do is have ChatGPT write a book and you're not paying attention and then you publish it without reading it. That's not what you want to do. That's where you end up with a book that has like a lot of crazy stuff in it, because it will forget who the characters are. It will go off track. All of these things will happen. But if you're just reading it and you go, oh, I don't like this section, change it. Each time there's a section, you're going to end up with a pretty good book that matches what you want because you made it into what you want. So you were very involved, even though you're the passenger instead of the driver.
I'd like to follow up with one question about ChatGPT and the arts. And I'll give an example. Say I'm an e-commerce seller and I sell puzzles with different designed puzzles. And I'm trying to figure out what would be the most appealing design on my puzzle to sell to the end user. How could somebody, or t-shirt designs or whatever, but we'll stick with the puzzle example. How could somebody use this tool to identify what is appealing to people?
So ChatGPT has plugins now. And you can add in, I use 2 plugins, one that gives it access to YouTube videos and one that gives it access to internet searching. So this happened earlier today to me, activated my Pinterest prompt. And then I said, I was doing a demo video for someone and I said, tell me 10 trends that are hot on Pinterest right now. And I guess I could be able to do this. Right. I was just messing around. I don't know exactly what it did, but I know that it used the YouTube plugin, not the web search plugin. And it gave me 10 shockingly good answers. There, I was like, oh, this is amazing. It's going beyond what my pre-prompt had trained it to do. So it was a really exciting place to be. So when you have those 2 activated, you can ask it questions like that. You can just say, hey, give me 10 trends in puzzles that maybe people haven't noticed, but are probably going to go up in the next few months. And it will look at all sorts of weird data sources. It will pull data from Amazon because it has that ability to look at Amazon now. It will pull data from YouTube. It will pull data from blog posts. And very interesting how it comes up. It's not always going to be right. That's why you still have to pay attention and go, because it might tell you something like offensive puzzles. And you're like, I don't want to do that. Sure, maybe they're on the rise, but you're not like, there's bad word coloring books. Then you don't want to take every idea without paying attention. Your job is to be error correcting and paying attention, but it will probably come up with 10 really good ideas. T-shirts is the same thing because there's a bunch of people that post videos every week of these are the new hot trends in T-shirts. So probably it's pulling its data from those videos as opposed to running analytics on all of Amazon's database. But I don't know for sure because you can't always tell what it's doing. That's my guess, kind of based on looking at the input and the output. So that's really how I would approach it, is looking. You can always give it access to data sets. Like you can give it access to a spreadsheet. So if you're using like an obscure website for selling your puzzles, or like a more specific puzzle website, then you can pull out a database of all the puzzles on there and the sales data. If you have that, then it can interpret that spreadsheet and give you huge amounts of insights from it because it now has access to Google Sheets.
You said that there was 2 plugins that you could use to, what are the names of those?
Sure. For internet access, I use Web Pilot. And then for YouTube, it's called Vox Script. I believe it starts at VOX. And it allows it to pull the transcript of a YouTube video. So it doesn't have to actually watch the video. You don't have to wait for it to watch a 20-minute video. It just pulls a transcript and pulls the data from that. And it takes like 2 seconds.
Yeah, for sure. Those are awesome. And those are Chrome plugins that will...
No, they're ChatGPT. Inside of ChatGPT, if you go to the settings, you can click a beta setting that says activate plugins. And there's a plugin store with around 1,000 plugins to choose from. Just like everything else, ChatGPT's made it a nightmare because you have to click like 7 things to find it. And then they've organized all the plugins alphabetically with no categories. And you're only allowed to have a 1-sentence description. So it's a nightmare to figure out what tools, but those 2 are really solid ones that have worked consistently and I've never had a problem with either of them.
Awesome. I'm going to go enable those. So for the listeners that, Jonathan, you had mentioned early on that the teams that have put these tools together are not marketers. They're not, they're of a different breed. And so we understand that. And so if we have some listeners that maybe they've tried AI, tried ChatGPT, and they, like you said, hey, go in there and do one thing. It doesn't produce anything. What is your advice to them? Should they start with the question route, go and start asking it questions? Should they go read your book and then come back to it? What is your advice for them?
Yeah, the shortest path is just to ask questions. You say, I want this result. How do I get there? You can say, I want to do this. How do we do it? And you can ask a really open-ended question. It doesn't even have to be what information do you need from me. You can just say, well, how do we get there? And it will help you work through it. And it's very collaborative. That's one way to do it. My book is a bunch of prompts that I've used that made money, and you can watch the entire conversation. The beauty of that is you can see what result I got. And if you copy and paste the prompt, you should get the same result. So it really lets you see both sides of the conversation. There's a lot of books out there that only show the prompt and not what result you're going to get. And I hate that. That's like listening to half a conversation. How do I know if I got the right result if I don't know what the result's supposed to look like? So that's really the process. What my book is designed to do is give you tons of prompts in different categories. Some people read it and they just jump to the sections that have the skill they want to work on. Like, I just want to work on affiliate marketing. I just want to work on like analyzing data. I just want to work on summarizing data for me. I just want to work on writing blog posts faster. Oh, I just want to work on planning, building business plans. So whatever kind of skill you want, you can jump to that section, and it gives you a starting point with copy and paste prompts. I think that's the only way for a beginner to start. The other thing that's important is that most people, the reason they don't use ChatGPT is that they're afraid it will think they're an idiot. I had the same fear. I was like, what if this AI thinks I'm stupid? I don't want that to happen. I don't know if it's training itself or when it takes over. And I don't want to be the list of dummies. I want it to think I'm smart. I had this whole fear. So you just have to let go of that. Everyone has that same fear. It erases the conversations after you have them. It doesn't remember in between conversations. So I could talk in one chat thread. I open a new one. You can't remember the other thread. It's designed that way. And you just have to release that fear, because the only way to learn is to make mistakes and ask silly questions and get silly answers and all of those things. Like, I only found out that it won't write the naughty scenes in a romance novel because I was asking it to do. And then my wife walked by and goes, well, then what's the point? That's the only part of the book she likes. You don't know what it will and won't do until you kind of hit that wall. And that's how you learn. But you just want to release the fear of getting a bad result. And just, how many times do you get back up riding a bike as a kid and you're skidding your knees and you're getting hurt? There's no risk of that happening. But we have these adult fears that you just have to let go, because you have this fear of embarrassment or fear of looking dumb or fear of looking silly. Like, every time I go on a podcast, I go, what if they ask a question I don't know the answer, right? It doesn't matter. You just have to let go of that fear, because it's just going to hold you back.
No, I really like that. So I know we're coming up on time. I want to rip through a couple more quick questions. Well, let's say like 2 or 3 prompts or 2 or 3 ways to use ChatGPT or any AI tool to increase revenue or profits for an e-commerce company. Anything come to mind?
Yeah, the most important thing is speed. For e-commerce, and I've been working on an e-commerce project with some partners, so this on my mind a lot. The first thing is that you can actually connect ChatGPT to a spreadsheet. And once you train it what you want, you can actually just have a product name, product link, then you have an area for description, bullet points, and title. And you can actually just pull the box down and it will fill in like 50 or 100 products at once. So you can actually do batch work that way. Instead of having to do it within the ChatGPT interface, it will do it in the Google spreadsheet interface. That's the first thing. So you can actually do massive amounts of content creation that way. The second thing is that you can use it for analyzing spreadsheets. So you can activate a plugin called Wolfram Alpha, which makes it better at math, or you can use, they're always changing the names, but there's always call it like data analytics or different names, but you can activate one of the beta features, which kind of turns into ChatGPT 4.5. It makes it better at data analytics. I can't remember the name they have for it today because they just changed it recently. Either one of those modes lets it be better at math and better at problem solving. Then you can link it to your Google spreadsheet and you can say, like, tell me which of the products meet these criteria, right? Like, oh, it has to have sold X number of products in the last 3 days. It has to cost over $20. It has to have a profit margin of this. It has to have different sellers, and none of the sellers is Amazon direct. Like, those are some of the things I know for people that's on Amazon. Then it can analyze a spreadsheet of millions of pieces of data in like seconds. So the other thing it can do is actually write formulas for you in a spreadsheet, because I'm always bad at that, right? Like the one of like, oh, everyone entered first name and last name in the same column. How do I make it 2 columns? How do I remove duplicates? I always forget those, and then ChatGPT just tells you how to do it. So you can have it either analyze the data and do what you want, or you can have it write those different programs and formulas for you to get those results. So those are some of the things that I would use it for as an e-commerce seller. I think those are the low-hanging fruit.
Is it a quick explanation on how to connect it to a spreadsheet?
There's a plugin called, I think, G Sheet, and you just activate that plugin and it will connect it to it. There's also a way inside of Google Sheets to connect it a different way. It's just whatever I tell you will be changed within 2 weeks. Like the way of doing it always is always getting easier. So the method's always changing. Just knowing that it can do it, and then you can look inside of ChatGPT, you can just ask it and it will tell you what's the most current way to connect to a Google Sheet easily and to access that data.
In the intro, I mentioned that you live on a remote island in the South Pacific. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how you run your business there?
Yeah. So everyone I started out with in 2010, when I started building my business, we were all like, yeah, we're going to travel the world and go all around. And so my business got successful. And 2 years later, I was like, it's time to hit the road and go country to country. All my friends were like, what are you talking about? We bought office space. We wear suits to work now. And I was like, isn't that what happened? Right? I was like, I thought that was our agreement. So I just started traveling. I went to live in Goa, India for 3 months. And then I was in Ukraine. And then I went to London. And then I was in Thailand. And then I was in Indonesia, just bouncing around all these different places. And then I visited one of my friends and met my wife. And I was like, oh, that's a reason to stick around. And we have 4 kids together. And there's things you go through. So we wanted to move to this island, and the island had an issue of like sometimes the internet would go out for 4 or 5 days at a time, or the power would go out for 3 days at a time. So you might only have internet 2 days a week. So I really moved a lot of my business onto Amazon for that reason. I was doing a lot of webinars, and I was like, I can't do live webinars anymore because I'm not going to have internet for 3 days, right? 2 days before, 2 days after. So we really switched to a model that was much more really passive, just in case. So when I write emails, I'll write emails for 2 or 3 weeks in advance, just in case. So it's all done. So even if the power goes out or whatever, the business keeps running. So that was part of the strategy. Now, then we moved to that island and the problem's kind of gone. And now I live on an island that has gigabit internet. I don't have it. My last house had it. This house, I can only get 250 because they have it for my neighborhood, but it's already taken. There's not enough bandwidth for one more house. All the other houses got, I guess. That's the issue is now like there's 4 providers that all provide high-speed internet where I live. So it's kind of changed this misnomer. I often am on calls with people that have slower internet than me. So the things that were really a challenge before have kind of gone away, which is like, oh, I changed my whole business model to deal with slow internet and I don't have that problem anymore, which is very cool. The other thing is that, it's 2 a.m. for me. You have to adapt to other people sometimes and go, well, sometimes I have to work at night because it just is what it is, right? I'm going to go and live somewhere else. So that's part of what I do as far as adapting. And also it means that it's much easier. The lighting is better at night because I can control it. And my kids don't come in the room, blast in the room all the time because during the day they do all the time. They come in here all the time. I never lock the door because I don't want that to be it. And so they blast their meetings a lot. That's just kind of a decision I made, because I don't want to become distant from my kids. Those are some of the things I do. The other thing is that you have to be someone who can self-motivate. I survived a natural disaster, a tier 1 natural disaster, which is like the highest level you can survive about 3 years ago with my whole family. And coming out of that, my business kept running. It made enough money to pay all the hospital bills for me and all 5 of my kids to survive. When we came out, I had a heart attack like 6 weeks ago. So it's, what do I do afterwards? I'm like, well, I said to the doctor, like, when can I train? Like, how long can I get on a bike? And now, like, my wife is getting nervous because I'm getting absolutely shredded because every single day I put in 24 minutes on the bike and I run, like that scientist says, like someone's behind you with a syringe full of poison. I bike as hard as I can. I'm always trying to raise my heart rate so that my resting heart rate gets lower and lower. I want to be in the excellent category so I never have something like that again. So I have a particular personality type that when something happens, I'll do whatever it takes to get past it. So I work out 7 days a week. There's no chance of me not doing it. Some days I only do bike. Some days I do bike and elliptical. Some days I do bike, elliptical, and lift weights. Some days I just only lift weights. But I'm always training. I'm always doing it 7 days a week because I don't want that to happen again. But there's a lot of people who don't have the ability to self-motivate. There was a bunch of travel bloggers that I followed around 2016. They all started traveling. They made enough money to travel full time. They're all out of business within a couple of weeks because they would go to Machu Picchu and not write any blog posts. And then, of course, they go out of business. So they didn't have the ability to do both. That's why there's like people who work from home and they're always like t-shirt and then the bottom half is pajamas. That's the type of person that is seeing what they can get away with. But when you work for yourself, you have to kind of be this person who does whatever it takes. There's this thing inside of you that says, I'll take a project I hate if it means that my family eats this month, right? I'll work with a client that I'm not really excited by, but I'll do whatever it takes. And I've taken some projects that I hated, but I was like, I'll do what I got to do because I'm a survivor. Like I have this instinct inside of me. So that's all part of it. So it's really personality stuff. So I was talking to someone last week who was complaining about a product I was talking about. She goes, oh, my husband said it's not a great product. I said, if your husband doesn't think it's a good fit, don't buy it. Anytime someone emails me and I'm an affiliate for a product and they're like, oh, I'm on the fence, I go, don't do it. If you're emailing me, then definitely don't do it because I'd rather you not have a bad experience than buy it and be mad at me. And so I said, oh, there's another business model you can test, which is you can go to all the Goodwill stores in your town, scan it with an Amazon app. And if you see a big price difference, you grab that listed on Amazon. And then it was a response that I didn't really read because it started off with, oh, I don't have time. And I said, okay, that's the difference. It's that because my wife was like, oh my gosh, I wish we could do that, right? She would be out there doing it every day because she has a motivation element that some people don't have. So if you want to live remotely, you have to be someone who doesn't get distracted by living on the beach and all, because it's awesome. I have an awesome house. I can't believe how nice my house is. Like, just honestly with you guys, like I have a pool, I have a basketball court. It's tiny. It's not even a half court, but it's still like, are you kidding me? That's so crazy. Every time we see that, like every time my wife gets mad at me about something, I go, how many bathrooms do we have in this house? And she's like, okay. You're right. We have an awesome house. It's just a reminder because sometimes we forget. I go, one of the questions I used to ask in the last house, I was like, is there a room in this house you haven't been in 6 months? That means the house is huge, right? That's crazy because we used to live in a studio apartment together. So some things you have to be very good at, which means you have to be fastidious. You have to work. My dad gave me this piece of advice a few years ago, which is when you know that you're a second generation workaholic, he goes, listen, Jonathan, you shouldn't work more than 6.5 days a week. He's like, you got to take off a couple of hours every single week. And I was like, well, that's intense, right? And it's true. I work every day, but I work shorter hours and I spend a lot of time with the kids. And I would rather work 5 hours a day, 7 days a week than 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. It's kind of a shift thing, but it's important to know if you have the personality that can motivate if no one's watching you, if you can still work. What happens to a lot of people, and it's very cool that you guys went through this phase and it didn't happen to you, is that when you can only work 2 hours a day because you have a full-time job and you're just working at night, you have to be so efficient. Then when you quit your job, you suddenly have 8 hours and you go, well, I have all day to work on this. And so you work slower. This happens to a lot of people. There's a lot of challenges as an entrepreneur. You face huge amounts of depression because you're alone all the time and no one understands what you do. And you shift from being around people to being alone. Every entrepreneur deals with it, right? And it's like you don't know until it happens because it doesn't happen when you're only working part-time. You don't know that having more time can sometimes be a curse because it kills that efficiency. It's like the people that say only operate well under crunch. So they only work well like the week before the papers due and then they're very efficient. So unless they're in a constant state of emergency, they don't get things done. So it's very hard to become that type of person. You can, but you have to be very fastidious and very much in charge of your day and plan it. Some people I know who are like me, they have their whole day planned out in advance. They're very, very scheduley. I'm not that. I'm very much freewheeling most of the time. I have a list of the things I want to work through each week. I make a schedule for the week and I schedule for each day and I just work through the tasks in order of priority. But it's all of these, it's kind of inside of you. Like, can I work on the task that makes me the most money, even if it's boring, instead of the task that's the most interesting, even though it will make a difference for my business? Like, that's the part of the motivation thing you have to do. And this business is mostly about relationships. It's mostly about friendships and connections and talking to people. Because if someone's, let's say you're running $1 million a year e-commerce store, which is awesome. How do you get to $10 million a year? You talk to someone who's doing $10 million a year, right? If you can talk to someone who's doing $10 million a year, $50 million a year, then you can see, because that's a huge jump in scaling, right? It changes the math, it changes the process. So relationships and handshake deals are so big on the internet, which is kind of crazy. You think it's not how it's going to be. You think it's going to be all like e-contracts and lasers, and it's the exact opposite. It's all about trust and relationships. So learning how to do those things online, learning how to maintain relationships, learning how to stay sane and not get distracted by the loneliness and kind of figure things out. It's very much a process, right? And it's just like anything, because a lot of people, right, when you leave your job, everyone in your job goes, I don't understand what you're doing. You're leaving the security of a job. It's like, is there really job security here? Of course not. Right? It's just a false belief. But people, when you're surrounded by people that don't get it, it can be very challenging, which is why it's great to find communities, whether it's online or in person, where you can talk to other people that are doing the same thing, because their families don't get it too. They go, you work online, but it just seems like magic, right? They think we're all in crypto, which is like, no, I don't do I do anything in crypto. I use a computer. That's the only similarity, but that's what can happen. So those are some of the challenges that if you can overcome those, you can have massive success. Like the reason most people who work online don't live on remote islands is because they never Googled what it costs. They all think that it's 50 years ago and long distance phone call. Like, I'm not paying 25 cents a minute to be on this call. Like, that was in the 80s, but we don't look or update information. There's like 10 tropical islands you can move to where you don't need a visa and you can live there for a year as an American, and the cost of living is super low, and then you don't have to pay taxes. So you make 30% more money just by getting on an airplane. Most people don't look it up, because if they looked it up and found out how much cheaper it is, there'd be this pressure behind them to take action. So if they don't know the information, then they don't have to take action, so they can justify kind of not making the change.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And final question before we get into the fire round. Do you prefer the digital nomad lifestyle, or do you prefer being stationary?
I was bouncing around as a digital nomad. It was awesome. It's very hard to be efficient with a tiny screen laptop. Like, that is something that kind of stinks. It's like you can't really see everything. What I prefer is, like, everywhere I go, I just want to buy 3 giant monitors so I can have a big setup. That's the one thing for me for sure. The other challenge is just that I have young kids. My kids are all 10 and under. So I wouldn't travel without them. Like, that's not something I want to do anymore. We just went on this awesome vacation where, like, my kids were playing with a tiger, then riding an elephant, then going to water parks. Like, we love doing that cool stuff together, like seeing them have adventures. That's the phase of life I'm in. I'm in my 40s. So I already did the travel the world by yourself. You have to have a particular type of business, which is very, very passive, where you only have to check in once a week, and then you can do more of that stuff traveling with kids. But my kids are in school. They go to a really good school. They're just learning some really cool stuff right now. That's So that stability, I think, is very good for them. It's very hard for kids to have no structure, to be fully nomadic. It can be very challenging for them. They almost go feral because they like had no idea like in any type of structure, right? And that's the challenge. Like, oh, every day there's a different time zone. Every day we have different structure. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So there's no predictability. So there is a value in, things are different when you're a kid and when you're adult. There's a value in having some ability to interact with society and make friends and develop social skills. Those things I see as a value. I think that if you're younger in your 20s and you want to travel from country to country, that's what I was doing for like 6 months before I met my wife, and it was awesome. Sometimes things in your life make you want to change. I'm not done traveling, right? I want to take my family to see the pyramids. I want to take my family to see the Northern Lights. I want to take my family to Machu Picchu. I haven't been there. I want to take my family to see Angel Falls in Venezuela, the longest waterfall in the world, if it ever opens up, right? There's a lot of cool things to do that my kids will appreciate more when they're older. Like we go on these massive vacations, and sometimes I'm like, what's your favorite part? And they go, the airplane. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's my least favorite part. That's the whole trip. So kind of my answer that I want to live somewhere awesome that's far away. So I kind of have the best of both worlds. That's why I love where I live. Like I have a great life and have a little bit of stability at the same time.
Well, cool. Anything else that we skipped over we want to cover before we get into the fire round?
Well, let's get into it.
All right, Jonathan, are you ready?
Do this. I'm ready. Let's rock.
Right. The fire round is a series of 4 questions, quick answers, and we'll rip it through it. What is your favorite book?
The Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi.
Nice. What are your hobbies?
Windsurfing right now. Those are the 2. Oh, and lights. As you can see, I'm always messing with the lights in the room. I program the lights myself. I'm like always connecting wires and trying different things. So I was trying to find a hobby that's not expensive, but that I can get really into. So I said, I'll get really to LEDs because it's like I can control myself.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So for those listening, we'll have it on the YouTube channel. Go and check it out. Jonathan's got some really super dope LED lights in the background. The next one, what is one thing that you do not miss about working for the man?
Being shouted at. The reason I said I never want to go back to work where someone can fire me or shout at me. I don't want anyone to have that power ever again.
Yeah, fair enough. Last one. What do you think sets apart successful entrepreneurs from those who give up, fail, or never get started?
I think there's 2 things. So the first is consistency, which is I'm not a genius. I'm not a really good worker. I just work every day. I work every day. I put in a little bit. I move the ball forward a little bit every day. There's people that are chasing virality. Oh, I'll just keep taking swings until the one thing spikes on TikTok, right? And it comes and you do well. And then when it's gone, you don't know what to do. So it's the ability to put in consistent work over time. Like I can't check my email today and then not have to check it again for a month. You still have to do it every day because there's things that you have to check every day. The second thing is that everyone talks about love, like, oh, love is the ultimate motivation. If you love enough, you'll succeed. I don't believe that. I think it's hate. You hate your job enough, if you hate your boss enough, if you hate your life enough, it will push you out. And that's the thing is that some people, what happens is that people go, oh, I don't really like my life. It's like the guy who's trapped in the friend zone. He's like, well, I'm not really happy with my situation, but I have half of a relationship, so I'll just kind of settle for it. It's only when you hate how bad you feel that you then exit that and finally find your true love. In the same way that if you just are lukewarm about your job, then you're kind of going to be stuck there for a long time. But if you hate it and you hate your boss and you let that fuel you, like every time someone is like told me I can't do something, then I go, well, then I have to do it because I have to prove you wrong. And that's not a motivation driven by love. There's a stronger emotion inside of you, which is the hatred for who you used to be or the hatred for who you are in life. Those, I think, are 2 powerful motivators.
That's an excellent answer. And yeah, I agree. And I know David does too.
Jonathan, if people are interested in getting in touch with you or joining some of your courses, what's the best way to get in touch?
You go to servenomaster.com/AI. A bunch of free gifts, a bunch of free tools. You can link you to my book, ChatGPT Profits. And if you can't remember that, just Google Serve No Master. Every result for the first 100 is me. So I have total control over my brand name.
Well, we really appreciate your time today, and we are looking forward to staying in touch.
Thanks for having me, guys. I had a good time.
Before you go, we wanted to share a new service that Ken and I have been using called Getita that has made us over $10,000 in Amazon reimbursements. The service requires no monthly subscription, and Getita collects a small percentage of the money they recover for you. It takes less than 5 minutes to set up and works on all Amazon marketplaces. Go to Getita.com, Getida.com, and enter promo code FTM400. That's FTM for Firing the Man 400 to get your first $400 in reimbursements commission free. How much money does Amazon owe you?